and we're now going to proceed to the debate on justice and equality, which means we have to take motions number 33 to 37, and I'm calling on the mover of motion number 33 from the Dublin Rathdown Constituency Council to move the motion. Letty.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see such a full hall here at this time. I'm speaking on motion 33, and this is where conference calls and notes the difficulties that adults with severe physical or intellectual disabilities and their families encounter in having to deal with multiple agencies in order to access the care and support necessary for them to lead full lives. And we all know, and I certainly know, of families within our own communities who have children with severe physical or intellectual disabilities. They can be lucky and they can get their child into a school. And I say lucky because this is by no means a given. And I know again within my own constituency, families who cannot get their child, maybe who has autism or other intellectual different abilities, into a school. I know of families who had to set up their own school in order to allow their child access to education, and that is subjecting parents and families to a life of fundraising and trying to scrape money together in order to get their child some sort of an education. Whatever support is there for these youngsters, it seems to disappear once the children become 18. And it is not right that these young people are literally handed back to their parents or their families or carers without a plan, and it is not right that these young people are condemned to a life of sitting at home without any ongoing education or any stimulation for them. Parents, families and carers, they have to navigate through various services again. Now apparently there is a budget, but trying to access that budget, it's not at all clear. And where you have somebody who maybe with a disability and during their time in school or whatever area they are, where a speech therapist hasn't been replaced for over 6 months. This is a situation that isn't good enough and cannot go on. But once they become 18, there is literally nothing there for them. Those youngsters cannot and do not go on to work or go on to college or do what people with different abilities can do. So conference calls for the establishment of a single state unit entity to provide access to the necessary comprehensive support services for adults with severe physical or intellectual disabilities and their families, to replace the current fractured and opaque system of state, commercial and voluntary services. I move this motion.
Thank you, Letty. That was Councillor Letty McCarthy, who is also our candidate in the Dublin Rathdown constituency, moving motion number 33. And can I again emphasise, please, movers and seconders and speakers to please say who they are and their branch or constituency or section or whatever before, so that we have a record of an accurate record. So, seconder, formally seconded. So motion number 33 is before the floor. Motion number 34 now, in the name of Labour Equality. Pádraig.
Friends and comrades, the aim of this motion is not just to end the direct provision system, which should not be operating in this country. It's to make amends for that system by granting an amnesty to anyone who has been in that system for more than 12 months, to give people who have been in that system a path to normalisation, a path back to a normal life, and a way of integrating into this country's life in a way that shows that they are respected. We can't complain about any other country's immigration systems when our system is deliberately punitive and for profit. We can't tolerate this system continuing in its current form, and we must make amends for one of the worst things we are doing to people at the moment in this country. I ask you to support this motion to help those who are trapped in a system that does not treat them as human, that treats them as a source of profit, and that resents even a slice of bread to a sick child. We have to stop this system. And can I just address the addendum to the motion? I think it's a very good addendum, but I would be concerned that it is lecturing other countries about something that we are worse at. The Dublin Convention and the Dublin Regulations on acceptance of refugees into the EU has ignited such a fire in Europe that we have to take responsibility for our part in that. So I ask you to support this motion and to end the system of direct provision and to give people a normal life. Thank you, comrades.
Pádraig, just to be clear, are you accepting the addendum?
Yes, accepting the addendum.
You're accepting the addendum. Okay, thank you, Pádraig. Is there a seconder for the motion now? Formally seconded. Thank you, delegates. I know, just, Sean, I'll chair the conference. Right? Yeah. So now I want to call on Pádraig.
Sorry for that. Pádraig McLaughlin, Chair, Labour Equality.
Thanks, Pádraig. Now, again, can I emphasise, the first thing you do when you get up is say who you are and what branch, constituency, section, whatever you're representing. Please. Now, can we have the mover for the addendum in the name of Inishbigil Mayo? Sorry, Sean.
Jeremy Holt, Inishbigil Mayo, affiliated, I think, to the Westport branch, according to the bits of paper. I am the sole member. I'm like a chairman of a tribunal. Sole member on Inishbigil, but there you go. I think what I'd like to do, the easiest and quickest thing to do, is to just read you an email I sent to the relevant minister. Dear Minister, I'm advised by the Office of the Attorney General to address my representation to you. A report in the Guardian online edition dated 24th of the 9th, 2018, referred to the revocation of registration of the Médecins Sans Frontières vessel Aquarius. Aquarius is operating search and rescue missions in the Mediterranean, as indeed are Irish Navy vessels. The report states that having been deflagged by Gibraltar and re-registered by the Panama Maritime Authority, our EU colleague Italy brought pressure to bear on the PMA to again deregister the Aquarius. On humanitarian grounds, I call on the Irish authorities to immediately extend an offer of Irish flag registration to any humanitarian search and rescue vessel stripped of registration on spurious or political grounds. Yours sincerely. Chairman, I was delighted to see that the relevant minister is Comrade Ross. So I urge our parliamentarians to do their very best anyway. Yeah. And if anybody's speaking to this motion afterwards, I'd love to hear if there are any medics or any volunteers, overseas volunteers, maybe could put a word or two in. Thank you.
Thank you.
I commend the amendment.
Now, is there a seconder for the addendum? It's formally seconded. Thank you, delegates. Now, motion number 35 in the name of the Crumlin, Kimmage, Frank Klutsky branch.
just checking this, check out who I actually am. Michael O'Sullivan from Dublin South Central, actually from the Joe DC branch, but the person proposing originally is unwell. In our motion is about pathways to citizenship, but I would just like to say that in the motion it refers to people who were born outside the country, but since we submitted the motion, the issue about the young lad in Wicklow, Eric Hugh, who was born in this country, has lived in this country, has gone to school in this country, and now he's been told he's not an Irish citizen, has come up. And I just want to welcome the comments from Brendan Howland to say that the Labour Party are going to do something about that awful amendment that was passed in this country in 2004, which has led to situations like this where people who are born and bred in this country are told that they're not Irish citizens. So I welcome that, and I think it's something that it's long overdue. The amendment allows us to legislate to stop this sort of thing happening. But people like Eric are going to face the same problem that's identified in this motion. We've been lucky over the last 20 years or so to welcome hundreds of thousands of people who come to live and work in this country. And luckier still that many of those want to make their life here. They want to settle here and become citizens. And that's a good thing. It means they can continue to contribute, and it means then that we have equality for everybody. Everybody is part of our society. However, there's a problem. Sometime about 2011, we hiked up the fees for people who want to become citizens. So the fee for a single person, one person on their own becoming a citizen, is at least €1,250, €1,250. You might have additional costs because you've got to get some documents translated. If you're a family, if you come here and raise your family here and 3 or 4 kids and a couple, it could cost them €3,000 or €4,000 to get citizenship. That causes an immediate problem because a lot of people who came here work in jobs that aren't really well paid. So we have an initial problem with equality in that migrants who are well paid can access citizenship, those who are not so well paid will put it off. We have an extra problem that's happened because of Brexit. There are lots of people here with British passports who've lived here for 30, 40 years, raised their family here, may now be pensioners here. They're being told that they have to pay €1,250 to get a passport here now, which is because of Brexit, something that they didn't think they needed, now they need it. And on the other hand, we have people who may never have set foot in the country, who happen to have an Irish grandparent and can get the same citizenship rights for €270. So these are anomalies that we can deal with. They're anomalies we need to deal with because we need to make sure that the diversity that has contributed so much to the country is supported by equality. So I urge you to support the motion.
Seconder, is there a seconder? Formally seconded. And now we're moving to motion number 36 in the name of Dunleary Constituency Council. Here.
Thanks, Chair. Deirdre Kingston, Dunleary Constituency, Blackrock Branch. Comrades, this motion from the Dunleary constituency expresses solidarity with all of those who have been a victim of sexual abuse or violence. 42% of women have experienced some sort of sexual abuse or assault, and over a quarter of men have experienced one or the other as well. The SAVI report, which stands for Sexual Abuse and Violence in Ireland, was carried out to assess the levels of sexual abuse in Ireland, and it looked at the impact on victims as well, and also looked at how we should resource services in this country and the attitudes towards people that have been victims of sexual assault. This report was last carried out 16 years ago. It's a huge amount of time, and a huge amount has changed since then. There's been an awakening in this area, and many women and men are now more confident about talking about their experiences, and they feel that they have the support in society as well to come forward and speak about it openly. So the importance of these studies can't be overestimated. We know that only a very small percentage of people actually report these experiences to the Gardaí. So reports like these are very important because it provides a safe space for people to discuss their experiences. It also ensures that there is investment in these areas, and that sends a really important message to survivors. It tells them that they are worthy of this investment and that we support them 100% in dealing with their trauma. It's nothing to be ashamed of, it's nothing to be brushed under the carpet, which is why it was pretty unacceptable to see that Fine Gael were delaying committing to spending just €1 million on an updated report. Since then, they have said that they are going to carry it out, but they want to see how they go about it. So they're delaying, another delaying tactic, and I think it sends the wrong message out there to people that have experienced any sort of sexual assault. So it's only through repetition of these reports that we are really going to get an understanding of the trends that we're experiencing in Ireland, and then we can properly plan and resource the services for victims in this country. That's why the motion calls for a report to be done every 5 years, and I'd ask you all to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre. That was Councillor Deirdre Kingston, who is also our candidate in Dún Laoghaire constituency next time out. Is there a seconder for the motion? It's formally seconded. And now we're moving to motion number 37 in the name of Dublin North West Constituency Council. Andrew.
Councillor Andrew Montague from the Dublin North West constituency and candidate for the next general election. I want to tell you about an issue that's happening in my own community and in many communities around Dublin and around the country. And that's the issue of motorbikes being used really to terrorise the communities that they're in. This June, on a Saturday night, two of my neighbours, two women in their late 50s, were meeting to go out on a night out, met at the local Centra shop, and they were standing outside the shop when a motorbike mounted the pavement and smashed into them, and they broke multiple limbs, both women. While they were lying on the ground, instead of trying to help them, the perpetrator roared and abused at them to threaten them in case they might ring the guards to get the motorbike seized. So while this was happening, a local drug gang came along, took the bike away and removed all evidence. So by the time the guards came, there was nothing the guards could do to get that bike. And that bike is still in circulation and going around our community on a regular basis. Some of our drug gangs have taken to buying these bikes en masse and they rent them out. So there's a couple of occasions where I've been walking down the street with my 2-year-old son and my 6-month-old son, where I've come across up to 10 bikes coming towards me on the street, scrambling, doing wheelies, mounting the footpath. Our communities are under terror, they're under siege, and they're screaming out for some help. So what are the guards doing about this? Well, to be honest, the guards' hands are really tied. Logistically, they don't want to chase people who are riding these motorbikes, and they're right, because that will encourage them to go even faster, to become more reckless, and to put more lives in danger. If they do, by chance, get to seize one of these motorbikes, they have to give it back if the person can show proof of ownership of the bike, so they can't hold on to the bike. So these bikes are just staying in circulation, and our community are staying under siege as a result. So, for that reason, I want to give the guards the power to remove these bikes without an automatic right to return. I think if somebody wants to get that bike, they should have to go before a judge and show how they would use that bike responsibly, and let the onus be on the person who's abusing their motorbike rather than on the guards to automatically give it back. And in the context of the terror and the abuse that our communities are under, I don't want to accept the addendum that we should be building motorbike parks to, in a sense, reward the people who are abusing these privileges that they've got. So, in a different context, I think that could be looked at, but I don't want to associate it with this motion to deal with the dangerous behaviour that's going on in my community. So I would ask you to support my motion, but without accepting the addendum. And that addendum, I think, could be looked at in a different context at a different time, but I don't want to associate it with this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew. Is there a seconder for the motion? Alison.
Councillor Alison Gilliland, Santry Kilmore in Dublin Bay North constituency. I want to formally second Andrew's motion and also emphasise everything that he has said about the threat of those bikes. I think one in my own constituency in Darndale Park has been featured on the television. It is very much a massive antisocial behaviour, and the guards' hands, as Andrew said, are tied. I'd also like to support his non-acceptance of the addendum. I do think it's a really great idea, and there are communities that would be very open to having those facilities, but they're two very, very separate issues. Thank you.
So now, have we a mover for the addendum in the name of the Oxmanstown branch? Is anybody prepared to risk the row? So, it's formally moved. Percy? Sorry? Is there a seconder? Yes, it's formally seconded. So now, the motions 33, 34 with the addendum, 35, 36, 37 and the addendum are before the floor for debate. Are there any speakers offering? Yes, Robert, come on. Can I ask, please, speakers, people intending to speak in debates, would they come up, please, and sit in the front so that we don't lose any time? Anybody wishing to speak in the debate now, would they please come up and sit here at the front? So I take it then that Robert is the only speaker offering.
Robert Dowds, Clondalkin and Rathcoole branch. I want to acknowledge, before I speak, the work that Eamon O'Riordan did when he was a minister with responsibility in the area of immigration. However, there is a great deal to be done, and I just want to make one point in relation to my own area. There is an asylum centre in Clondalkin, and the people there have been told that they have to vacate within a month's time. And there is a big scramble as to try to get alternative accommodation for them. So even when they are in asylum centre, some of them are in a very vulnerable situation. I want to make some broader points, though. I absolutely agree with the motion, but I think we need to broaden this whole discussion. We need to develop a full and proper policy in relation to migrants to this country. And amongst the things we need to provide for migrants is to have a situation where they have access to English classes, and I would regard that as something that's obligatory unless they are already fluent in English. And that on top of that, they should have access to classes on Irish culture, life and practice, because it is really an important thing in terms of people adjusting to life in this country. It can be small things. I mean, I was out with our local Tidy Towns group a few weeks ago, and there was an African woman actually from the asylum centre helping, and she was very gingerly picking up papers with a paper picker from the grass. So I said, "Why are you going so gingerly?" She said, "Oh, I'm afraid a snake might jump up at me." So she didn't know that there are no snakes in Ireland. So, I mean, that's just one small example. There are many, many examples of things. And people need to be given access to that information, and many of those people want that access anyway. But if they are to become, in the end, good citizens of this country, they will benefit, and indeed the economy of the country will benefit from giving those people a leg up. So, in conclusion, I would ask that we would actually set up a small group to develop a policy for immigration and for immigrants to Ireland, because it's something we are not accustomed to dealing with in the past, and it's been left on a laissez-faire basis up to this, and it is not good enough, and there will be considerable problems down the road unless we address this issue properly. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert, but I think you misled that woman by telling her there was no snakes in Ireland.
I did say there were some humans.
So we've no further speakers offering. I want to invite Deputy Sean Sherlock, the party spokesman on Justice and Equality, to respond to the debate.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and in order to be helpful to yourself as chair, as I always endeavour to do, I'm conscious of the fact that there are 3 more sections after this, and the television slot is at 11 o'clock. So I propose that we accept the motions that are put here before us today. I would just ask, please, that on 37, I understand where Andrew is coming from on this, but I was hopeful that maybe Andrew's motion would stand as a standalone motion because it is very specific. And if there was some compromise on the addendum, I think that would be very welcome. But I'll be guided by yourselves on that one. And I'm particularly delighted to see the motion in respect of the cost of applying for citizenship, because the cost of 1,125 is exorbitant. And we all know people within our communities, particularly from the UK, who might have been born in the UK but have lived here for many a year, working people who cannot afford to spend 1,125 euros to become naturalised. So I particularly welcome that motion, because I think we should do something for those people who have lived and contributed and paid taxes in this country. And the least we can do is to make the cost of naturalisation as not prohibitive for those people. Also, in relation to the issue of the direct provision and 34, I mean, 12 months to me is too short. I will be very frank about that. There is the McMahon report. There are 173 recommendations in the McMahon report, and I think what we need to do is to ensure that those 173 recommendations are absolutely implemented. But also the County Clare Direct Provision Centre, the issue that arose there with that young boy who was denied access to food. Well, I think the simple solution to that is based on common sense, that you have some sort of self-catering provision within every centre to allow for families access as needs be to simple provisions like food as and when is required. And I think that would solve a lot of that as well. So there is a clear issue, though, in relation to the private operators and the protocols that they operate, because what we want to see is a bit of humanity, a bit of decency, a bit of equality, and we need to treat people as human beings and not apply bureaucratic and technocratic solutions to them. Treat people with a bit of decency and humanity, which leads me on to the sound man from Inishbigel, Mr. Holt, who has Mallow connections, I'm delighted to report, and to say that this is an important motion as well. I'm happy to accept that, but I'm also happy to acknowledge the fact that Ireland has not been found wanting in respect of its efforts through the Irish Naval Services, working naval personnel who are saving lives in the Mediterranean. And we have to acknowledge that 1,700 lives were lost at sea since 2018. And this idea that the Aquarius now is having its flag revoked, the last of the private search vessels, is an anathema to what we stand for in terms of the European Union and what it should stand for in relation to its humanitarian efforts. So there needs to be a consolidated European Union approach to ensuring that you tackle the deflagging issue or the revocation of flags by Gibraltar and Panama and others, and ensure that there is a coordinated political redoubling of the efforts to ensure that no lives are lost at sea. So I'm happy to support these motions. I would just ask, please, for a little bit of latitude for Andrew on the Dublin West Constituency Council motion in relation to the addendum. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Now we're going to vote on those motions. So, motion number 33, all in favour, please show. All against. I declare the motion carried. Motion number 34, we have to deal with the addendum first. The addendum has been accepted by the mover. All in favour, please show. All against. I declare the addendum carried. And now motion 34 with the addendum. All in favour, please show. All against. I declare the motion carried. Motion number 35. All in favour, please show. All against. I declare the motion carried. Motion number 36. All in favour. All against. I declare the motion carried. Motion number 37, and there is an addendum which was moved formally from the floor on behalf of the Oxmanstown branch, which is not acceptable to the movers in the Dublin North West Constituency Council. So they are asking you to oppose it this time. So I'm going to put the addendum first. All in favour, please show. All against. Abstentions. I declare the addendum lost. And now motion number 37 without the addendum. All in favour, please show. All against. I declare motion number 37 carried. And now we're proceeding to the debate on education and skills. But before doing so, I want to make you aware, delegates, that I am informed by the General Secretary on behalf of the Conference Arrangements Committee that in accordance with standard well-established practice, I will be required to adjourn the debate at precisely 10:40 a.m. in order to facilitate the rearrangement of the platform for the policy debate, which will be going out from 11 o'clock on live television. It's not specifically indicated on the Standing Orders report, but I understand, I know from previous experience, it's standard practice, and I hope you don't challenge me on it, because if you do, the live debate will be about our procedures. So now we're moving to motion number 38 in the name of Dublin Midwest Constituency Council. Mover, please. Thanks, Sean.
Good morning. Eamon Tuffy, Lucan Branch, Dublin Midwest Constituency Council, and I'm proposing the motion on behalf of the Constituency Council. Chairperson, fellow delegates, in proposing this motion, I will speak mainly to the first part of the motion and just refer to the second part. And I'd just like to say three things. 1 in 5 primary and secondary students have some form of learning difficulty. That's a fact. Now, it obviously would vary across a wide spectrum. And parents and children are still experiencing delays, sometimes very long delays of the order of years rather than months, in having their children assessed, either at the stage before entry to primary school or at the stage where they're transferring to secondary school. Now, this delay is still there, even though in 2017 the Department of Education they introduced a new method of assigning special needs assistants and resource teachers and other supports to students with learning difficulties. Basically, they went away from they went to a system where the amount of support in terms of special needs and resource teachers was determined by what was called the profile of the schools. Now, I think it's fair to say, and I've never been a primary or secondary teacher, I think it's fair to say that the jury is out on how well that is working. Because if you happen to be a child, or if you're a parent of a child in an area which doesn't have the profile, which will get a fairly good allocation of resources, and you have to have your child assessed, then you can have to wait as well. The motion refers to reducing a bill. Having looked at the legislation that's already in place, and there is quite a lot of legislation in place from the Education Act of 1998. There's an education of children with special needs legislation, there's disability legislation. And by the way, in the disability legislation, in I think it's section 29, that refers to the fact that the HSE is obliged to respond to an application for special reports for a person, but including a young person with a disability within 3 months. Now that is simply just not happening. In fact, the HSE is in breach of the, basically in breach of the legislation there. Now I just use that point to say that I would leave it to the party spokesperson on education and the PLP to decide. Perhaps a bill wouldn't be appropriate. There is plenty of legislation there, and as often happens in the case of Ireland, basically it's a question, the dots are not being joined up. Definitely from evaluations of supports in national schools that I've read, formal evaluations, the schools have very much taken on board the requirements of special needs students. The resources are being allocated and the system is working very well and has the full support of the teachers. So I would ask that maybe it's just a question of looking at some of the existing legislation and its enforcement, or it may be necessary to propose amendments. In regard to the second part of the motion, my colleague Robert Dowds has already referred to the fact that people, including children in detention centre, they really have very little supports right across the board. But in particular, in regard to their education, you can think that it must be very difficult living in a detention centre to do your study, etc. And I think and I'll finish on that by formally proposing that. Thank you. I'll take this way down.
The motion number 38 is moved. It's formally seconded. We're moving to motion number 39. And please, delegates, it's 3 minutes to move the motion. I don't want to fall out with anyone, but it's 3 minutes.
Deirdre Kingston, still from the Dún Laoghaire constituency. Comrades, Labour has always led from the front in terms of radical education policy. It was our own Minister for Education, Niamh Brenach, who in the 90s opened up third-level education to everybody by abolishing fees. It was our Minister for Education, Rory Quinn, who set up the Forum on Patronage and Pluralism, which led to the growth of multi-denominational schools and further choice in our education system. The next question on radical educational reform is about who governs our schools. When one undemocratic, unelected church body runs over 89% of our schools, we know that there is going to be a problem with accountability. Back in 2012, the Irish people voted to enshrine the rights of the child in our constitution, and although this happened 6 years ago, there has been no attempt by the Department of Education to revise any of the legislation to reflect that vote. It is now time to ensure that the rights of the child is central to how the schools operate and not the patron bodies. So this motion is asking the Department of Education to review the legislation to ensure that the rights of the child are central to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deirdre. Is there a seconder? Seconder, formally seconded. And now motion number 40 in the name of Waterford Constituency Council. Councillor John Pratt to move.
Councillor John Pratt, Waterford City and County Council. The sole councillor in Waterford, but we're going to change that after the next elections. The motion which I'm speaking on is the provision of a university for the South East, and I'm calling on the Fine Gael government to intervene in any way that will ensure that the provision, to fast-track the provision of the university status for the South East. Currently in the South East we have nearly 9% of the national population, but we only receive 2.4% of investment, capital investment. And we also generate 5.6% of national GDP, but we actually in return receive 9.6 billion of a shortfall. As you know, we currently cannot provide places for in the region of 8,000 people in university in the South East, so we are losing those to other regions, whether internally within the country or outside of the country. And as you know, once young people move, the chances of them returning is very slight, and as a result there's a brain drain from the South East, so I'd like to move this motion.
Thank you, John. Is there a seconder? Formally seconded. Thank you, Bridget. Now, motion number 41 in the name of Listowel branch.
Luke Crowley Holland, Kerry constituency. Just moving this on behalf of the Listowel branch and my comrade Sean McCarthy, who couldn't be here today. Just in what's been said about keeping it short, the kind of, I suppose it speaks for itself in terms of the success of the Citizens Committee in relation to looking at the 8th and everything, and everything that Deirdre just said in relation to the place of the child in the Constitution. So I'd urge in the important area of primary education that we support this motion. Thank you.
Seconder. Is it formally seconded? Thank you. So now motion number 42 in the name of the Sentry Kilmore branch, Dublin Bay North. Alison.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Alison Gilliland, Santry Kilmore, Dublin Bay North. Colleagues, everyone in this room and indeed in broader society recognise the intrinsic value of a full and rounded education and access to lifelong learning opportunities to the holistic development of the individual and the realisation of their talent and potential, and by default the potential of our society. However, not everyone recognises the need to fully fund and resource our education and lifelong learning systems. Too often, many families and workers are denied education and upskilling opportunities because of their financial costs. No more than our health care, full and timely access depends on paying privately sometimes. For example, our primary school system is growing more and more dependent on voluntary contributions from parents to pay basic running costs. Parents with children that have speech and language difficulties or special education needs too often are forced to pay privately for therapists or for education assessments rather than wait for years on an under-resourced public system to deliver. The most vital of materials, school books, must be bought by parents, costing hundreds of euro each year, a real stretch for many parents. Principals, particularly teaching principals, are also stretched, trying, due to the lack of properly secretarial and caretaker supports, to stretch their time and energies. Over the years, our society and economy have seen the progressive impact of Dun O'Malley's free education system and our own Niamh Brannach's free third-level education, which sadly I have to put our hands up and say we partially reversed. We, above all parties, are a party of equality of access and opportunity. And like our colleague Dean Carberry said yesterday, we actually know the meaning of it, and it's not a fancy strap line, unlike others. Therefore, colleagues, we must fully commit to a policy of proper free, and by that I mean appropriately funded and resourced, no requirement for voluntary contributions, no having to buy books, materials or equipment, and no registration fees. So a free primary, secondary, further ed, apprenticeship and third-level education system for all. Also, in an ever-changing and revolving economy, we must develop and commit to a comprehensive lifelong programme for those in work, those seeking a change in career or those facing job extinction. For example, I'm particularly thinking of workers in the carbon-intensive sector, such as Bord na Móna, and the need for just transition to a clean, green energy environment. To conclude, colleagues, public services are not truly public or accessible or universal if there's a financial struggle attached to them. And neither do they fully serve those needs unless they are fully resourced. Education is no different. I ask you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Is there a seconder? Formally seconded. And now motion number 43 in the name of the Hugh Nevin, Ballybrack, Branch Dunleary. Valerie.
Good morning, comrades. Valerie McDermott, Hugh Nevin Branch, Dunleary constituency. The background to this motion refers to a school in our particular area that my children go to, Clonkeen College. It's the only non-feeing boys' school in the area. Back in the summer of 2017, the Christian Brothers, who actually own the land that the school is on, told the board that all the playing pitches, 7 acres of playing pitches, were to be sold. The patron of the board, Erst, did nothing to help the school, and it was left to the actual board of management of the school to go out in their own names and take a high court case to try and stop that. This was so stressful for these people. Their whole lives, their houses, their jobs, everything was on the line for this. As well as the school having 550 boys, it also had a special needs unit that had been put in the last 3 or 4 years at considerable cost to the taxpayer, plus there had been an 11 million extension, again at considerable cost to the taxpayer, and all of this was being put under threat because all of their pitches were to be sold. Now, thankfully, at the last minute, there was a deal done, and this didn't happen. But it shouldn't have to come to this. The state should be able to step in when school lands which are being used on a day-to-day basis. The kids play hurling, football, soccer, all sorts of sports. The area was open for the community to use as well, so it wasn't just for the school children. And in particular, finally, I'd just like to thank the Labour Party councillors in our local area, Deirdre Kingston, Carrie Smith and Dennis O'Callaghan, plus Aon and Alan, for their support during this time. But I'd like to hope that, comrades, I hope this kind of thing doesn't have to happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Have we a seconder for motion number 43? Formally seconded. Thank you, Delegate. And motion number 44 now, in the name of Clonsilla Branch, Dublin West. John.
Good morning, colleagues. John Walsh, Clonsilla, Dublin West constituency. Colleagues, the intention of this motion is straightforward. It is to reinstate fully and to restore the position of history as a compulsory subject and a core element of the junior certificate curriculum. And I think I can do no better by starting with a quote from our recently elected president, Michael D. Higgins, who argued in May 2018 that a knowledge and understanding of history is intrinsic to our shared citizenship, and that historical training was vital in allowing people to critically interpret a range of sources and perspectives, and to allow citizens to face a world in which information was disseminated without regard to truth or factual accuracy. And if you need an example of why a wider appreciation of history is important, then look no further than the recent presidential election, where a number of candidates seemed not only to have no understanding of the past, but also not to know what was going on in the present. And the level of ignorance on display about the Constitution, about how and why the presidency was created, about the historical roots of the presidency, and about the kind of office the presidency was simply spectacular. And was almost impossible. The scale of the ignorance was such that it was hard for journalists to interrogate critically. History matters a great deal. It matters for individuals. It matters for our educational system. It's important for our educational system because education cannot simply be reduced to skills. The role of education is not simply to produce workers with appropriate skills, as if people were produced from an assembly line, but to allow people to develop fully their potential as individuals and to give them the full range of abilities which allows them to participate as citizens in a democratic society. History is even more important in the present, and I'll give a couple of very brief examples. In allowing us, for example, to appreciate the true position of Peter Casey as a historical footnote to the extraordinary victory of Michael D. Higgins, and equally important to the great social movement that led to repeal of the Eighth Amendment, and before that to the achievement of marriage equality. History matters as well in seeing Donald Trump in his proper perspective, as a nationalist demagogue whose politics are a dangerous throwback to a bygone era, and whose practice of the politics of resentment is dangerous but is nothing new. So history has never been more important than it is now, and I would say in conclusion, delegates, that history is too important to be left to historians like myself. It's too important to be left to politicians. History is for everyone. I commend the motion.
Just there a seconder for motion number 44? It's formally seconded. Thank you, Delegate. Motion number 45 in the name of Tipperary Town Branch. Do we have a mover? Mover. Yes.
Good morning, delegates. My name is Olive Maguire and I'm from the Tipperary constituency. Confident calls on government to make mandatory the amount of PE hours at primary school to combat rising obesity levels and encourage young people to participate in sport. We are a country with a rising level of obesity, and exercise is crucial for a child's development. Sport is a great way to foster friendships and helps with communication skills. The WHO recommends children and teenagers to get 1 hour of vigorous exercise every day. In Ireland, this is met by just 12% of 12 to 18-year-olds. This is just not good enough. You know, Ireland as a country needs to be reactive, not proactive. Needs to be proactive, not reactive, as has been the case in recent years. We are creatures of habit, and if these habits are not instilled in us at a young age, it is highly unlikely that we will pick them up as adults. We are on a slippery slope to be one of the countries with the highest levels of childhood obesity in Europe. According to Safe Food, a quarter of Irish children are overweight or obese. At primary level, 60 minutes of exercise could easily be made up throughout the day, and with various exercises. PE has proven to improve children's mental as well as physical activity, but with researchers at DCU saying that 36% of 11 to 12-year-olds were below average in simple motor tasks. These fine motor skills should be honed throughout physical activity and development. Their absence could lead to significant problems in later life. Exercise and activity are key solutions, and as a matter of urgency, we need to make mandatory the amount of PE hours in primary school to combat rising levels of activity in our younger generation. I commend the motion to the conference.
Thank you, Delegate. Is there a seconder? Formally seconded. Now we have 3 minutes to conclude this debate. 3 minutes. How many speakers are offering? Well, I'm going to take the speakers. Mick?
Good morning, Mick Keegan here, Labour Disability. I want to recommend that we accept what's called now, oh God, I'm lost. Yeah, 38. The one where children need special needs and whatnot. Last night I spoke on early intervention with children with disability. This is another extension that kids who have a disability trying to get into schools, the mainstream schools, need that extra attention, and not just the idea of waiting to be assessed has to, out. They should get it there and then. And that also includes that if they need equipment to help them to primary, second level education, and especially in third level education, an awful lot of people need the equipment. Those who are blind or deaf and whatnot need all that equipment to be able to get them through education. Labour disability is about taking down barriers with people with disability, and the education system, the way it's set up at the present moment, puts barriers unknown to itself, but we want to try and focus that so people understand these barriers are taken down. I hope you accept the motion.
Thanks, Mick. 2 minutes, Sean. Give Aidan 1 minute.
Chahirlig Sean O'Hergoin, Charlie Smith Branch, Kilkenny City. I'll be very quickly. I'm particularly speaking in relation to the Listowel motion on patronage and the need for a discussion on patronage. I think it's very important that this party supports a widespread discussion. We've had white papers, we've had green papers in relation to patronage, but I want to focus on something that I said at previous conferences, and that is, in the meantime, the flawed system for the selection of new schools, which in effect is an X-factor competition largely run on Facebook at the moment, and in many ways, and there's a very clear case in Senator O'Riordan's own constituency, we are following a huge competition, well-funded competition by a number of patrons. One patron was selected for the selection of the school. 35% of the parents in the area wanted a Gael school, and it took almost 2 years from the time of the original decision for the Minister finally to relent to the wishes of over 500 people for the right of Gael Oideachas. And I'm just going to ask one thing as a party. I respect that we want to see plurality and we want to see changes in the way that our education system is run, but the traditions run very deep, and I think we need to be careful to respect the views and the wishes of all parents to continue with traditions in their own parishes, in their own areas, and to pardon a bad pun, not to place as an article of faith that we automatically support one patron over another, because ETB schools and Gael Scoil under Forest Patrúnachta management are also multi-denominational schools and allow another option to people who have other sets of views. Gramahagas.
As there are no other speakers, I now invite Senator Aidan O'Riordan, the party spokesperson on education and skills, to respond.
Chairman and delegates, just some thoughts on Labour Party's position on education and the motions that have been proposed. I believe people want to hear politicians who say it like it is, so then let's say it as it is. A 3-year-old from a poor family has 1/3 the vocabulary of a 3-year-old from an advantaged family. Think of that. 3 years of age. Motion 38 speaks to that. 17.9% of the adult Irish population are functionally illiterate. 1/3 of children leave disadvantaged primary schools with reading deficiencies. Some young offenders in our prison system sign their names with an X. I'm just saying it as it is. The 300 million the government blew in tax cuts could have delivered a free book scheme to every primary and secondary student in the country, widened the clothing and footwear allowance, increased capitation so voluntary contributions will no longer be needed, lowered our class sizes, help to bridge that gap between those 2 3-year-olds who live in very different Irelands. So let's say it as it is. Taxes pay for things. Tax cheats cheat us all. And tax exiles cheat us all. So we're just saying it as it is. Instead of tax cuts, the government could have made education free, as Motion 42 says, but they didn't. They could have finally ensured job certainty and respect for our SNAs, caretakers and secretaries, but they didn't. They could have made a bold statement about their intent to totally eradicate illiteracy and educational advantage, but they didn't. I'm just saying it as it is. Under this government, the lobby groups control education. The Catholic Church made Fine Gael roll back on their religious instruction commitments in state schools. The private school sector ensured the admissions bill gives greater rights to the children and grandchildren of past pupils. I'm just saying it as it is. And we know who hates the idea of a fair assessment for means for a student grant. Poverty is a thief. It steals childhoods, it steals dreams, it steals the beauty that a child can see in the world. Education is the great liberator. It frees the spirit, the soul and the mind, and Motion 44 and Motion 45 speak to this. Education is not the means by which to produce an economic unit, but the process by which a human being can make the most of themselves and contribute the best of themselves to all that need them in any possible way. Noel Brown waged a war against TB in the 1940s because although people will always get sick, they shouldn't get sick because they are poor. And we know that people will always have reading problems, but they shouldn't have reading problems because they are poor. Literacy must be a national cause. We must make literacy a national cause and deliver on the right to read, and Motion 38 speaks to that. Finally, delegates, we must reconvene the Citizens' Assembly. to break the constitutional link between church and state in education, as motion 41 says. We must make education free because it is a constitutional right, as motion 42 says. And we must put children at the heart of our education system, not the churches, not the private schools, nor the corporate interests, and motion 39 speaks to that, because education will liberate us all. Our party is best when we are Labour. Our party is best when we tell it as it is. I support motions 38 to 45.
So now, delegates, thank you, Aidan. We're going to very quickly vote on these motions. So all in favour of motion 38, please show. All against. Motion 38 is adopted. Motion 39, all in favour, please show. All against. Motion 39 is adopted. All in favour of motion 40, please show. All against. Motion 40 is adopted. Motion 41, please show. In favour. Against. Motion adopted. Motion 42, all in favour, please show. All against. Motion is adopted. Motion 43, all in favour, please show. All against. Motion is adopted. Motion 44, all in favour, please show. All against. Motion is adopted. Motion 45, all in favour, please show. All against. The motion is adopted. We're going to adjourn for a minute, but don't leave the hall, delegates. Thank you.